In the early days of June 2014, the Anderson family packed up their silver SUV and headed northbound out of Redding, California. It was a Thursday morning. Overcast skies, mid-60s, the kind of weather that makes the forest breathe easy. They'd planned a 3-night trip. Nothing ambitious, just a getaway, just time together. Jason Anderson, age 41, school teacher, soft-spoken, raised in Merced, loved woodworking and had a habit of leaving tools on the porch. His wife, Brianna, 38, worked part-time at a dental clinic. She'd recently started a photography blog, and their children, Elise, age 12, Milo, age 9, and June, just 5. They'd chosen Klamath National Forest, not because it was well known, but because it wasn't. They didn't know, of course, what that forest has seen, what it's still hiding. There are parks and forests in this country that draw millions. Yosemite, Yellowstone, Zion. Klamath doesn't have crowds. It doesn't offer gift shops, shuttle loops, or canyon overlooks. But it's vast. 1.7 million acres of shadow, high ridgelines, and deep, unnavigable ravines. It's the kind of place you visit when you want to disappear for a while. And sometimes, it's the kind of place that helps you do just that. The Andersons were last seen at a gas station in Happy Camp, a logging town that still feels frozen somewhere around 1975. One pump, one cashier. Jason paid in cash. No cell reception, no digital footprint from that point forward. After that, they vanish into the trees. And for 72 hours, nobody thinks twice. It wasn't until Sunday evening that the first call came in. Another camping group, a retired couple from Siskiyou County, reported an abandoned site off Forest Road 47N21. Tent still staked, coolers half open, the SUV doors unlocked, but no people, no fire pit ashes, no voices, no footsteps leading away. The responding ranger on duty that night was Marcus Ellery. He was based out of the Eureka Field Office and had spent nearly 2.5 decades patrolling Northern California's most remote forests. He'd found hunters lost in snowdrifts, climbers stranded in burn zones. He knew the difference between confusion and danger. And according to him, this wasn't either. When Ellery arrived, he noted something was off. Subtle, just out of place. Food was inside the tent, sealed, untouched. Clothing for all 5 family members still rolled and clean inside the duffels. A children's book lay open to its last page. One pair of small shoes, tucked neatly beside the zipped tent entrance. But there were no signs of panic, no struggle, no torn fabric, no animal prints. And that's what disturbed him most. Because in the forest, when something goes wrong, it leaves a mark. This one didn't. Ellery documented the scene, took photos, radioed it in. But within the hour, things began to change. 2 unmarked vehicles arrived, bearing no federal or state logos. The men who stepped out didn't show badges. They asked no questions. They gave instructions. Ellery was asked to leave. He wasn't thanked. He wasn't briefed. He wasn't allowed to collect anything else. 3 days later, the search was officially called off. No press conference, no expanded investigation, and the Anderson family quietly became another line item in California's long list of unresolved outdoor scenes. But Marcus Ellery never let it go. In fact, over the next few years, he began collecting stories, strange ones, old ones, unreported disappearances, ranger logs that vanished from archive, locals who swore they'd seen lights where no trail existed. He kept notes, voice recordings, and photos, all tucked away in a box labeled simply Klamath A. In the fall of 2023, Marcus retired. Less than a year later, he contacted us. He said there was something we needed to hear, something the public had been denied, something about the woods near Grayback Road. Something about what that campsite really looked like when he arrived, and what he heard just before he left. This is MindFuel, and this is the Anderson case as you've never heard it before. If you're here, you're likely someone who already suspects there's more behind stories like this. You've seen the patterns. You've sensed the strange way they disappear from headlines. And you've probably asked the same question we did. Why this family? Why that forest? Subscribe now to follow every chapter, because what we found buried in the details of this case goes far beyond a single vanishing. And it's only the beginning. The Anderson family was ordinary, but in that quiet kind of way that makes disappearance even harder to comprehend. Jason and Brianna Anderson had lived in Redding for over a decade. Their kids, Elise, age 12, a violinist, Milo, age 9, who played Little League, and June, 5, who had just begun asking why the moon followed her, had never been farther than Oregon. They had a golden retriever named Daisy, rescued from a shelter, and for reasons no one could later explain, they took her with them. They told neighbors they were heading out for peace. Jason had just finished grading his final papers for the school year. Brianna had wrapped up a photography session for a wedding. The trip was supposed to be short. They packed light, essentials, a tent, a secondhand camp stove, and Jason's old DSLR camera. They drove out early that Thursday morning. The plan was to stay at a backwoods site, roughly 40 miles off Highway 96. It wasn't part of any major campground system. It was known only to hunters, loggers, and longtime locals. A place called Bear Loop. Bear Loop isn't marked on modern trail apps. You won't find a sign pointing the way. And even if you do find it, getting there means passing through terrain that eats cell signals alive. Tight switchbacks, thick second-growth pine, and canyons where even walkie-talkies fail. The Andersons' vehicle, a silver 2008 Honda Pilot, was equipped with a third-party dash cam. It was set to loop recordings every 2 hours, but a partial file survived. That footage was recovered during the initial investigation and later mirrored to a backup drive by Ranger Marcus Ellery, who, against orders, kept a private copy. The footage shows a simple forest road, dust kicked up behind the SUV. Children can be heard laughing faintly from the back seat. Brianna leans forward to adjust the radio. Jason is focused on the road. The windows are down. It's summer, but not hot. The timestamp reads 2:48 p.m. At 2:51, the laughter fades, not because the children stop, but because the sound itself begins to distort. The trees seem to grow darker. The road narrows. And then at 2:53, the fog rolls in. It doesn't creep. It snaps in, as if someone flipped a switch. Visibility drops to less than 20 feet. The camera lens strains against the whiteout. Jason slows the vehicle to a crawl. Brianna leans closer to the windshield. There's a low mechanical hum in the footage, though the vehicle isn't moving faster than 5 miles per hour. At 2:55, the dashcam glitches, frame drop, black screen, then nothing. The last ping from the family's GPS signal comes shortly after, just past 3 p.m. It was recorded from a high-elevation spur known to local rangers as No Echo Ridge. That name isn't a poetic label, it's literal. There's a stretch of rock at the crest of the ridge where, for reasons no geologist has properly explained, sounds don't bounce. Even a shout returns nothing. You can hear yourself speak, but the forest doesn't reply. Sound is swallowed, gone. That location has long held an informal reputation among tribal elders and off-duty rangers alike. Several unofficial reports over the years reference missing hikers who passed through the area, always during poor visibility, always under unexplained fog, and almost always never found. The Andersons' ping came from a spot just 400 yards off the ridge, a blind bend, no maintained trail, a clearing known to only a few survey maps, most dating back to the 1960s. Beyond that, no more movement, no more data, no messages sent, no calls received, only silence. It wasn't until 3 days later that Ranger Marcus Ellery was dispatched to check the area after reports came in from another party camping nearby. They described an empty site, a tent fully pitched, no smoke from the fire ring, children's toys in the grass, a leash tangled in a folding chair leg, but no voices, no music, no barking. What they didn't know, and what Ellery would soon find, was that the forest had already begun to reclaim the space, and that what remained didn't add up. You're watching MindFuel. This is the Anderson case, and this is Chapter 2. Subscribe now to continue with Chapter 3, where we return to the campsite. Because once you hear what Ellery found, you'll start to understand why some call Bear Loop California's silent field. The Anderson family's disappearance wasn't the first strange event in Klamath National Forest, and it wasn't the last, but it was the one that forced people to start talking, to finally say what they'd always kept behind closed doors, or tucked into the final minutes of bar conversations, muttered with eyes lowered, voices dropped. People who live near these woods, they've seen things, not always the kind you can hold in your hands. Sometimes it's just a change in the air. Other times, it's something far less explainable. In the months following the Anderson investigation, MindFuel sent researchers and independent investigators into Siskiyou County, not to solve the case, but to listen, to see if others had walked close to what the Andersons may have encountered. What we found were stories, dozens of them, scattered, unconnected on the surface, but too specific to ignore. One hiker, who asked not to be named, told us about an overnight trek just 12 miles south of Bear Loop. He and his brother had stopped to rest near a dry creek bed. Sometime past midnight, he claimed he woke to what sounded like his brother calling his name from the tree line. But when he sat up, he saw his brother was still asleep beside him. He got up, circled the tent, but the voice kept calling, same pitch, same tone, but with one flaw. He says it didn't echo right. It was like the forest copied the sound, but didn't understand how humans actually use it. It bounced at the wrong angle, too flat, too fast. Another man, a retired fire watcher named Graham Thorne, lived in the region for nearly 30 years. He told us something else. He didn't report voices, but he said the trees changed. They move, he said. I know how that sounds, but I've worked too many seasons not to see it. You wake up, and what should be east-facing pine is suddenly shadowing you from the west. You mark a trail, you loop back, and the same marker is behind you, not in front. The trees aren't where you left them. His story matches a pattern seen in 8 other regional testimonies gathered between 2009 and 2022, all within a 20-mile radius, all referencing environmental shifts that didn't line up with maps, compass bearings, or daylight patterns. And then there are the lights. They've been reported near rock outcroppings, small, flickering orbs of dim light, floating just above ground level, too low to be drones, too irregular to be insects. Some say they appear only at dusk. Others see them just before weather changes. Most who notice them don't follow. But the few who did, we weren't able to interview any of them directly. Each had left the area permanently. Some abruptly sold homes. Others simply stopped responding after first contact. One account came through a third party, a field biologist who had worked seasonal contracts near No Echo Ridge in the late 2000s and 10s. His contact, a fellow ranger, relayed a moment during a night survey where the biologist stepped toward a flickering light. According to the ranger, the biologist took no more than 4 steps and then fell silent. He was recovered the next morning, barefoot, 20 feet up in a cedar tree. No memory, no injuries. But he quit his job a week later. He now lives out of state, refuses interviews. One current ranger, who requested anonymity, contacted us after our second interview request was denied by Forest Service Administration. He had this to say: "I won't go on record, and I won't say my name, but I've worked out there long enough to know there's something wrong with the ground. It hums, not like a sound you hear, more like something you feel when you're too still. It builds behind your ribs. It stays with you even after you leave. I have a rule now. I don't go near Bear Loop after sunset. Ever." He's not alone. Another off-record tip came from a California search and rescue volunteer who told us that Bear Loop was once marked as a no-training zone, a kind of informal boundary where teams didn't practice drills or simulations. The reason: compass failures and time slippage. That's the exact phrase he used. And that phrase, time slippage, showed up again in 3 unrelated interviews from 3 unrelated individuals, all describing the same thing: losing track of hours, watches failing, sunset arriving early, mornings that felt like night. Time didn't move wrong, it just didn't move right. Whatever the phenomenon is, it centers around one place: Bear Loop, and more specifically the ridgeline just beyond it, No Echo Ridge, the last known location of the Anderson family. What's most disturbing isn't just the accounts. It's that no one's trying to disprove them. There's no effort to reassure the public. No science teams investigating anomalies. Just silence. Official, methodical silence. And yet, the stories persist. You're watching MindFuel. If you've stayed with us this long, you already understand. The truth hides in the forgotten corners. The quiet reports, the things dismissed as folklore. The Anderson case may have ended for law enforcement, but it hasn't ended for us, and it hasn't ended for Ranger Marcus Ellery. Chapter 4 is next, and in it, we return to the campsite. For the first time, you'll hear what was never added to the official record. You'll learn why Ellery refused to ever return, and what he believes was waiting there, long before the Andersons ever arrived. Subscribe now to MindFuel. Chapter 4 releases soon, and it only gets darker from here. It took nearly 48 hours before a formal search was launched for the Anderson family. By then, the campsite was quiet. Too quiet. Forest Service reports show that the alert wasn't even triggered by a 911 call. It came from Ranger Marcus Ellery himself, who, against protocol, returned to the site alone after a restless night and a memory he couldn't shake. He'd seen the vehicle. He knew the trail shouldn't have ended where it did, and more than anything, he couldn't explain the way the air had felt when he first stepped onto Bear Loop that Friday morning, like something waiting behind every tree, holding its breath. Search and rescue was activated at 8:43 a.m. Saturday. The team, composed of 4 rangers and 2 volunteers, set out before noon. They carried heat sensors, 2 certified K9 units, and aerial mapping tools. From the first mile in, things started going wrong. According to the initial field logs, the group split accidentally, not on purpose, not by disagreement, but because the trail itself had forked unexpectedly, dividing into 2 overgrown offshoots where there should have been one. GPS scans from their portable units later showed both paths had looped into each other, but not at the time. Ellery stayed with Team A. The K9 units went with Team B. What Team A found at the primary campsite wasn't consistent with any missing persons case they'd handled before. The tent, what remained of it, had been shredded from the inside. Clean tiers through thick nylon, not cut, not burned, torn. Bedding had been dragged from the mouth of the tent out into the ferns. No footprints, just drag marks. There was blood, not pooled, but smeared. On the tent wall, along the zip line, streaks, not spray, as if someone had tried to push something open with their hands while bleeding. No signs of Daisy The dog, no prints, no fur. The most unsettling detail was the supply pile. They had stored their cooking gear in a secondary crate, standard procedure for families camping in predator zones. It had been moved, not stolen, not scattered, moved. Exactly 103 feet, as measured by Ellery himself. Every item still in the crate, nothing disturbed, but now placed neatly beneath a different pine tree, facing due north. Almost deliberately, like someone had picked it up and reset the scene. Team B never made it to the site that day. Their route dead-ended in a thicket of trees that didn't match topography scans. At 4:31 p.m., they radioed in that both dogs, specially trained for wilderness search, had refused to advance past a particular tree line. The dogs didn't bark, they didn't growl, they whined, tails tucked, ears flat. When the handlers tried to lead them in by leash, the dogs lay down, refused to move. One urinated on the spot. Team B was instructed to retreat and regroup. The lead ranger wrote in his log, "I don't like this place. It's wrong. The quiet is wrong. The trees are wrong. We're not where the map says we are. Even the sun feels off." That quote would later be redacted from the official report, but we recovered a copy through a retired SAR archivist who'd flagged it during a procedural audit. When asked why he kept it, he told us, "Because I don't believe they ever went the wrong way. I believe the forest moved around them." The search was paused overnight. The team set camp 400 yards down the hill from the site. Every hour, a different ranger took watch. Nothing happened until morning. When they awoke, the crate of supplies, the same one moved the previous day, had been moved again. This time, back to the original position. Every item still neatly packed. No signs of animal tampering, no tracks, no wind. At that point, Ranger Ellery made a call he would later describe as the first true mistake of his life. He stayed behind when the team returned to base, alone at the edge of Bear Loop, hoping, maybe, that the forest would offer something up if he stayed still enough. What he experienced that night will be revealed in Chapter 5. But what we know now, what you know, is that something was active inside Bear Loop, something that understood boundaries, that recognized routine, that waited for nightfall. This was no ordinary disappearance. The Anderson family wasn't just missing. They'd been removed. You're watching MindFuel. This is Chapter 4. If you haven't yet, subscribe, because the next installment changes everything. What did Ranger Ellery see that night? Why did he leave his post at 3:16 a.m. without calling it in? And what was found in his discarded notebook 2 weeks later? By the time the sun dipped below the ridge on the third day, search efforts had extended into Sector 6, a zone marked only by grid reference on government maps, but rarely entered for recreational use. The terrain there is steep, scattered with broken shale and cliffside ledges that rise and fall without warning. The air, even in daylight, feels thinner, and the tree canopy presses in tighter, as if the forest doesn't want you there. The teams had planned a 3-hour sweep before nightfall, but the final hour stretched long, and the darkness that arrived didn't feel natural. The first report came from an audio log, recovered later from SAR Unit 2's body cam recorder. Static, followed by a voice. "I heard a woman calling for help." We followed it. Found nothing. That statement wasn't recorded during the debrief. It wasn't written into the official field notes. The only reason we have it is because the recorder continued running after the shift had technically ended. The voice, identified as Ranger Kyle Mendez, spoke again just before the clip cut off. It sounded like she was right behind the tree line, but every time we moved, the voice moved too. Same distance, same tone, like she was waiting for us to step just far enough. Later, when interviewed off record, Mendez said something far more disturbing. He claimed the voice didn't echo, not once, not across rock, not across open clearing, just sound, flat and directionless. At approximately 8:17 p.m., another team stationed 300 yards higher on the cliffside reported unusual movement, but not from below, from above. Ranger Jenna Liu confirmed visual contact with what she described as a humanoid shadow moving uphill. The silhouette ascended at a pace that did not match the incline. She reported no visible gear, no flashlight, no reflective clothing, and in her words, no reason to be up there. Thermal equipment showed nothing. The figure was cold, no heat signature, yet it moved. A secondary drone sweep of the area at dawn revealed nothing. No prints, no loose rock, no signs of recent activity. But what stuck with Liu wasn't what she saw. It was how it moved. It didn't run, it didn't climb, it just rose. Her words, not ours. That same night, the contracted helicopter pilot assigned to the search operation was radioed to perform a brief perimeter check before sunset. Visibility was dropping, but standard protocol required an overhead pass. At 9:23 p.m., the pilot responded from the air. "Negative. I'm pulling back. It's too dark and something's off in the updraft. It's not wind. It's like the air's pushing from below." He circled once, then returned to base. In his post-flight interview, the pilot, whose name was withheld from public record, submitted a formal refusal to fly the Sector 6 zone after dusk, not due to weather, not due to mechanical issue. His reasoning was brief and final. "I'll fly any other ridge in Klamath, but I'm not going back up over that one at night. Something up there doesn't want eyes." That flight cancellation grounded all aerial support for the rest of the operation. It also left the team without exfiltration if something were to go wrong again. But the real story of that night, the one that never made it past internal reports, was what Ranger Marcus Ellery experienced alone, back at the edge of Bear Loop. At 3:16 a.m., Ellery's personal notebook was found 40 feet from where he had last been stationed. The pages were soaked, several were torn, but what remained was legible. On the back cover, in Ellery's handwriting, was a single line, written repeatedly across 5 pages. It's not mimicking them, it's remembering them. We didn't understand what that meant, not yet. But someone did. A former analyst who contacted us 6 weeks after our original broadcast aired. He claimed to have reviewed audio recovered from that same night. Audio that was never logged into the public SAR report. He said there were screams. Not just one, many, coming from different directions, all within the range of the same voice. As if one sound was being copied, stretched, repeated across the forest like bait. That voice matched the last known audio of Rebecca Anderson. This is MindFuel, Chapter 5. You've heard the screams. You've seen the way the forest responds to light, to dogs, to motion. But now comes the moment where theory meets artifact. In Chapter 6, you'll see the first photographic evidence ever leaked from inside the operation, and what was hiding in the background of those images. Subscribe now, because what's coming next was never supposed to be seen, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. By the 6th day, the tone of the search effort had shifted. It was no longer just about finding the Andersons. It had become a containment operation, quiet, unofficial, and heavily controlled. The public story said the family had likely drowned or gotten lost in the cliffs. But internally, something else had taken over. Federal wildlife officers began arriving. Unmarked vehicles, no insignias. They didn't speak to the press. They barely spoke to the local rangers, but they brought equipment no one had seen used in domestic forests before. Heat grid perimeter tools, infrared body scanners, even seismic readers. When asked why, The response was always the same: standard procedure. But what happened next was anything but standard. At 6:43 a.m., on the far side of Sector 6, a recovery technician named Pete Larison found something etched into the trunk of a redwood, something that shouldn't have been possible. Claw marks, 4, perfectly spaced, and at a height of over 8 feet from the ground. Each gouge was deep, 7 inches apart, measured clean with a forestry blade, not the scratchings of a bear or mountain lion. Those tear diagonally, erratically. These were even, intentional, cut straight into bark older than the state itself. A photo exists. It's blurry, rushed. The tech who took it claimed the marks faded a day later, vanished from the trunk entirely. When he returned to show the others, the bark was smooth again. No scarring, as if the tree had healed. But that wasn't the strangest discovery that morning. A sample of hair, tangled in low brush about 20 yards from the site, was collected and sent for immediate analysis. The report came back sealed. Unofficially, we were given access to the initial genetic breakdown through a source with lab clearance. The result? Unknown mammalian. Closest match. Primate, undetermined. No correlation with existing wildlife in North America. When we pressed the source for clarification, she answered carefully. It's not that we don't know what it is. It's that it doesn't fully register as alive. The DNA sequence stops before it should. Whatever that hair belonged to, it wasn't finished. And then there was the camcorder. It was discovered by 2 volunteers combing the banks of a shallow creek just beyond Bear Loop's northern trail. Waterlogged, but intact. A Sony Handycam, model from 2012. Consistent with what the Andersons were believed to have packed, it was turned over to officials, then lost. But one of the volunteers, unwilling to let it disappear, secretly duplicated the SD card before surrendering it. That copy was mailed to an anonymous YouTube archivist known for decrypting corrupted audio. And, in 2019, the files were leaked. We obtained access through a former moderator who archived the footage before takedown. What we're about to describe was confirmed by 3 separate forensic editors. The footage begins shakily, midday. The angle shows the youngest child, Ellie, pointing at something out of frame. She's not smiling. Her father is trying to calm her. The mother, Rebecca Anderson, is holding the camera. Then, static. The next segment is filmed at night. Rebecca's voice barely above whisper. If we stay quiet, it'll pass. Then there's a low thump. Branches. Something heavy, not fast, but steady. You hear breathing. Close. Too close to be anyone holding the camera. And then, screaming. A burst of panic. The frame shakes violently. You can hear the dog barking once, then a yelp, then cut. No more movement, no more voices. Just the sound of the wind, faintly, water trickling, and in the final seconds, a low hum, barely audible, almost felt more than heard. When played at reduced speed, the hum resolves into a rhythm, not mechanical, not digital, but patterned, like a low, deliberate chant in a language no one has yet identified. The camcorder was never officially acknowledged. The lab notes don't mention it. It never appeared in the list of recovered property. But we have the footage, and we verified the GPS coordinates. The camcorder was found in a location the family never should have reached on foot in that time frame. Miles from Bear Loop, past 3 block trails, no footprints. The working theory, they were moved. By something that didn't leave tracks, or maybe didn't touch the ground at all. This is MindFuel, Chapter 6. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time, because the next chapter breaks containment. Chapter 7 uncovers what wasn't supposed to be found. Internal Forest Service documents, night surveillance stills, and a ranger who went missing after warning his partner, "It knows we're looking." Something ancient is awake in Klamath, and we're just beginning to understand what it remembers. By week 2, the official narrative had grown thin. With no bodies, no signs of struggle beyond the clawed redwood and one ruined tent, the story was losing its grip on plausibility. Public interest was fading. The press was shifting attention. But behind closed doors, the operation intensified. They brought in a second team, quietly, no press release, no photos. 3 men, all former trackers, 2 ex-military, 1 contracted through a federal wildlife agency whose name doesn't show up in public records. Each had operated in foreign conflict zones. All had experience in environments deemed behaviorally unstable. None were local. The first tracker, known only by the name Lewis, was seen briefly entering the command trailer on day 14. That was the last time anyone outside the core team saw him publicly. Their assignment? A 3-day reconnaissance sweep through the ridges northeast of Bear Loop into areas previously abandoned by ground teams due to unstable rock and dense brush. They were given thermal imaging, body cameras, and analog maps, no GPS. That decision alone raised eyebrows. When asked why they weren't allowed digital nav, one ranger answered bluntly, "Signal bounces wrong in there, can't trust it." The team set out at dawn. They returned 36 hours early. Not one of them would agree to a formal debrief. No statements, no reports. And, from what we've confirmed, none of them stayed the full contract term. They left the state within 48 hours. 2 of them erased their social media entirely. The third locked his account and changed his listed residence to unknown. But a single audio transmission was captured, unintentionally, on an open frequency during their final night out. We obtained it from a communications tech who was monitoring weather frequencies. At first he thought it was interference, until he realized it was someone whispering, with urgency. Tracker, voice filtered, trembling, moved wrong, like it had broken legs, but fast. God, it moved so fast. That was followed by 30 seconds of silence. Then, a single breath. And the line cut. Another ranger, who was stationed less than a mile from their base camp that night, later confided in a retired fire watchman. He described hearing low footsteps around the perimeter of the trackers' camp. Not walking, pacing. It circled their camp for over an hour. No sound of approach, no animal noise, but you could feel it. Wait. Massachusetts. Whatever it was, it stood there, right at the edge, and none of them made a sound, not even breathing. The camp cameras that night recorded motion triggers, but no visible object. Timestamps confirm 23 separate disturbances, each between 20 and 45 seconds long. The trees moved, but the image stayed empty. The next morning, their tent was found unzipped, not ripped, not torn, just unzipped, and there were small piles of gravel inside, arranged in circles. Circles that hadn't been there before. The final known communication from the second team came from an encrypted radio ping bounced off a fire tower repeater at 3:17 a.m. The metadata shows nothing unusual, except for the location. The ping came from the opposite side of the ridge, miles from their known position. No trails, no roads. The question remains, how did they get there? And more urgently, what followed them? The second team's abrupt exit was explained away as inconclusive findings. That was the word used in the redacted report. But what they saw, what they experienced, left an impact far deeper than a lack of evidence. Because it was never about what they found. It was about what saw them. This is MindFuel, Chapter 7. The deeper we go, the more patterns begin to show. Camcorders with erased time codes, DNA that won't catalog, shapes that should fall but rise, and people who come back, different. In Chapter 8, we'll trace the footsteps of a ranger who didn't just witness the forest change, but felt it change him, and the journal he left behind, hidden in a crawl space after he disappeared without a trace. Subscribe to MindFuel. We don't chase fiction. We chase what the reports won't show you, because someone out there is trying to forget what Klamath remembers. There's a moment in every case where the question changes, not from what happened to why, but to something far harder to ask. Did anyone survive long enough to know? Until this point, every trace of the Anderson family came through indirect means. Abandoned gear, degraded video, a camcorder buried in brush. But on the 17th day of the operation, that changed. A park utility worker named Dalton Reese, while checking defunct relay lines near an unused firewatch tower above No Echo Ridge, came across something left beneath the steps. Tucked behind rusted metal and old utility tags was a soft case. Damp, scorched at one edge, but intact. Inside, a compact tape recorder. Mid-2000s model. Dusty. Battery nearly drained. But it turned on. And it played. The voice on the tape is male, adolescent, shaky, almost too quiet to hear without amplification. But what he says left no doubt. Boy's voice trembling soft. They took Mom. She didn't even scream. She just went stiff. Then gone. Dad tried to stop them. He yelled. Then he ran. I heard him for a while. I think I'm alone now. There's a pause. 10 seconds. Just the sound of wind pressing against the mic. Then, I think they're waiting for night. What follows next is 8 minutes of silence, broken only by shallow breathing. He doesn't speak again. But at the 6-minute mark, something changes. The recorder picks up footsteps. Soft, deliberate, and slow. One by one, they get closer. Then, the breathing. Not his. Something heavier, wet. Inhales like dragging sound through gravel. And then, on tape, you hear it. The creak of the firewatch door hinges. Not kicked, not broken, opened from the outside. And that's where the recording ends. The recorder's casing was found scratched. Deep parallel lines across the plastic as if it had been gripped by something far stronger than a child. Its clip was missing, snapped clean, no prints, no signs of forced entry on the firewatch tower door, and no footprints in the surrounding dirt. Nothing but wind. The tower itself had been decommissioned in 2009. No one had stepped inside it for years, but the interior showed signs of recent use. Blankets, an old backpack containing a half-eaten protein bar, and a worn-out sketch pad with only 3 legible words on the last page. Stay quiet, still. Investigators attempted to match the voice. Using home videos recovered from the Andersons' cloud backups, voice analysis confirmed a 94% match with their 14-year-old son, Caleb. There was no body, no blood, but the timestamp on the recorder was 2 full days after the family's last known GPS ping, which means at least one of them survived longer than anyone thought. The implication of the tape divided the team. Half believed the boy may have escaped, wandered off, and died from exposure, body unrecovered. Others, especially those who had heard the full uncut audio, came to a different conclusion. That whatever happened in those woods didn't kill quickly. It waited, watched, took them one at a time, and it listened. There's a final sound at the end of the tape. Barely noticeable, less than a second long. We isolated it, enhanced it. It's a click, like a tongue, pressing to the roof of a mouth. 3 clicks, deliberate, spaced apart. Click, click, click. Then nothing. No wildlife, no breeze, just absence. This is MindFuel, Chapter 8. Now you understand why this isn't just another forest mystery. This was a family, a trail of evidence that refuses to stay buried, and a forest that keeps changing the rules. Chapter 9 begins with a transmission never meant to be heard, a private recording from a now disgraced forest technician who made it clear the silence in Klamath isn't natural, it's instructed. Subscribe to MindFuel, because someone tried to hide what that boy saw, and the tape speaks louder than any report. Day 20. What began as a missing persons search became something else entirely, and the change wasn't announced. It arrived. At 3:14 a.m., multiple unmarked vehicles, 4 black vans, 2 transport trucks with no plates, and a matte gray helicopter, entered Klamath National Forest through an access road normally used only for firefighting equipment. No sirens, no lights, but the convoy was seen. A logging crew stationed near Ridgepoint Trail reported seeing the vans pass by their camp without slowing down. One of the workers, a former military contractor, said the men inside wore tactical gear. No visible insignias, no names, no ranks. They weren't there to search, he said. They were there to contain something. By sunrise, all official search and rescue operations had been suspended without explanation. Rangers were recalled, dogs were pulled, families were told pending environmental concerns made continued efforts too dangerous. The story given to the public? Due to unseasonal dryness and lightning strikes, the forest has been temporarily closed as a precautionary fire measure. But no fires were reported, not even smoke. The National Weather Service issued no alerts for the region, and satellite imaging from that week, now difficult to access, shows no thermal hotspots, no wind surges, no signs of flare-ups. What was happening on the ground didn't match what was being said above it. Within 36 hours, a 20-mile zone around the Bear Loop site was cordoned off. Locals in fringe communities like Iron Ridge and Cedars Bend were given relocation stipends to aid in early fire season preparation. But residents we spoke to told a different story. They didn't ask, one said. They told us, packed us up and moved us out. We never even saw smoke, but the helicopters kept coming. Just at night. One of those helicopters was caught on video. No running lights, no tail markings, and what appeared to be a mounted thermal rig facing down toward the trees. In one clip, a high-frequency tone is briefly audible beneath the rotor wash. Analysts identified it as an acoustic suppression tone, used in experimental crowd dispersal and wildlife control. But the forest was empty. They weren't trying to keep something out. They were trying to keep something in. Drone activity increased, not recreational drones, military-grade quadrotors with signal-masking architecture. At least 3 locals were visited by federal agents after posting footage of them online. The videos were taken down. One account was permanently banned. We obtained a low-resolution version of one of those clips. Shot from a cabin window, it shows 2 men in black gear retrieving something from a forest floor beneath the drone. The object appears wrapped in silver mylar, roughly human-sized. No statement was issued, no record of recovery filed. And then, everything went quiet. A sign was posted at every known trailhead, closed for wildfire risk, entry prohibited. Park staff weren't even notified. One seasonal ranger told us he found out from a hiker trying to return a borrowed GPS beacon. I went to the station, and it was empty. Computers gone. Radios silent. It was like someone erased the place. For 2 weeks, the forest remained under emergency closure. But the real emergency had no name, no report, just a disappearing act, a scrubbed timeline. Maps of the region were quietly updated. Entire trails vanished from the database. Aerial images from public satellites were replaced with lower-res stand-ins, time-stamped months earlier. Real-time tracking services stopped working entirely within the 20-mile zone. And yet, during that blackout period, one transmission got through. A hunter named Ray Morado, who had refused to evacuate Cedars Bend, left a voicemail for his brother. It was time-stamped 4 days into the fire closure. Ray's voice was shaky. You could hear wind, but no fear, until the end. It's not smoke, man. The trees are fine, but they're moving again, I swear. I think they're moving around us. And I saw them, the black vans. They don't look for fire. They wait, like they're watching something breathe. Beep. Ray was never heard from again. No missing persons report was filed. His cabin was found empty, with his door locked from the inside. This is MindFuel, Chapter 9. The moment the government arrived, the truth left. In Chapter 10, we uncover the journal of a forest technician stationed near No Echo Ridge, a man whose job was to map seismic noise, and who began recording something else. Subscribe to MindFuel. What you're hearing isn't fiction, it's fragments. From real events someone wanted buried, but KLAMATH doesn't bury, it remembers. After 26 days of silence, a statement was finally released. The U.S. Forest Service, in conjunction with state authorities and the Department of the Interior, issued a 3-paragraph press bulletin about the Anderson family. It read, in part, after exhaustive efforts and coordination between agencies, the family in question is presumed lost due to disorientation and possible predatory wildlife encounters. We extend our condolences to the family's relatives. No names were mentioned. No press conference followed. No Q&A. The case was quietly marked inactive. But what wasn't mentioned, what never made it into that statement, was how many people disappeared trying to find the Andersons. Because it wasn't just them. Since the beginning of the operation, a total of 5 individuals, 2 contract workers, 1 seasonal ranger, and 2 volunteer trackers have never been located. Their names were never publicly disclosed. And 3 full-time rangers who did file detailed accounts contradicting the official narrative were transferred within 48 hours of submission. 2 of them, according to internal memos leaked to us, were later placed on administrative leave for psychological instability. The 3rd, Ranger Owen Letts. He vanished en route to his mandated psychiatric evaluation. His truck was found abandoned at the edge of Sector 6, engine running, radio cracked in half. Let's' last log entry was never supposed to be seen, but a whistleblower sent it to us anonymously. It read, "They're not missing. They're gone. Gone like you drop a rock down a well and never hear it hit bottom." I don't think the forest is killing them. I think it's swallowing them. That phrase, "the forest swallowed them," reappears in 2 other redacted reports we recovered. One from a search team leader who had to be sedated after a night alone in Sector 4. They weren't taken by animals. The forest bent around them, like it knew they were there. Then it just closed. No sound. Just gone. But to the public, none of this exists. The only story that remains is the sanitized one. That the Anderson family likely got lost, that the terrain was too treacherous, that a bear attack couldn't be ruled out. But the autopsy reports, there weren't any, because there were no bodies. The claw marks found, not consistent with any known bear or mountain lion native to the region. And then there's the issue of the orbs. 6 separate testimonies from early phase responders describe flickering white gold orbs seen hovering near rock outcroppings after sunset. Those same outcroppings, when revisited, were found to be moved, not eroded, moved. Stones weighing several tons repositioned across several hundred feet overnight. The phenomenon was dismissed in internal memos as light scatter due to altitude pressure and optical misidentification under fatigue. Except it kept happening. And anyone who talked about it openly, even within ranger channels, was flagged for recertification suspension. In one striking case, a retired Klamath Firewatch operator named June Mallory came forward. She'd worked in that forest for nearly 30 years. Her words were simple. "It's not new, it's just louder now. I've heard it before, them, back in '91, when 2 hikers vanished and we were told to call it weather. The forest doesn't want us anymore." No one interviewed her. No paper printed her claim. Her statement was shared on a low-traffic forum for retired park workers. Within a week, the thread was deleted, her profile removed. She told us one more thing off-record, which we now include, because if this is truly being buried, then you deserve to hear every detail that hasn't been scrubbed yet. I used to hear my own voice echo back up the tower, only it would say something different. The official narrative depends on silence, but the forest, it's never silent. It echoes. And not everything it echoes belongs to us. This is MindFuel, Chapter 10. What's written down isn't always what happened, and what's left out is where the real horror waits. Next, Chapter 11. The campfire report, what the kids saw. Because there was another group out there. Teenagers, camping 3 miles off trail the same weekend the Andersons vanished. One of them came home with footage, the others didn't come home at all. Subscribe to MindFuel, these are real voices, and they're saying something no one else will. The Anderson case isn't the first, and the more you dig, the more you realize it never really started with them. Because long before the headlines, before the black vans, before the forests closed under false pretense, something else had already begun. In the summer of 1971, a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 children, set out to hike a stretch of wilderness now designated as part of the Bear Loop extension. Their last known sighting was at a ranger checkpoint near what's now called No Echo Ridge. They were never seen again. Their campsite, found 2 weeks later, was fully intact. Sleeping bags zipped, food unopened, shoes placed neatly by a cold fire pit. No signs of struggle, no tracks leading in or out. The only anomaly recorded? A local firewatch log that night, noting flickering lights moving in strange formation beyond tree line. The report was never investigated. Fast forward to October 1995. 2 brothers, experienced hunters from Medford, entered the woods north of Sector 6. They left behind coordinates with friends and planned to return by nightfall. When they didn't, a 2-day manhunt was launched. Helicopters, dogs, over 50 volunteers. They found both rifles leaning against a boulder, safety locks on, boots tucked beneath, but no blood, no bodies, not even drag marks. The dogs refused to track past the boulder. One handler later admitted something off the record. They didn't run. They didn't get lost. They were lifted, like the woods peeled open and they dropped straight through. 12 years later, 2007, a new voice enters the record. Not a hiker, not a ranger, a tribal elder. Hollow Hawk, councilman of the Karuk people and spiritual custodian of the northern Klamath boundary, gave an interview to a local heritage journal. He was asked about legends surrounding the deeper parts of the forest. He answered with a warning. They return when it's quiet. When the cold comes too early, they smell the difference, the spirits. They grow hungry during cold summers. His words were written off as metaphor, but something else he said was left out of print. It comes to us from the original audio file, obtained from a former archivist. They move through time, like we move through rain. You don't hear them coming. You just find the prints where there should be none. Those prints, those disappearances, they follow a pattern. A pattern that was never officially acknowledged, but quietly traced across decades by fringe researchers, retired rangers, and members of the surrounding tribal communities. According to the data, vanishings in the Klamath region spike every 9 years. Nitin Sitian, Nitin Otti, Nitin Otini, Nitin Otini, Chueni 2016, Nowa 2025. Each event is preceded by one or more of the following: strange light sightings, temporary compass failure, and what's been termed ambient dead zones, patches of forest where birds stop chirping, wind stalls, and even insects seem to vanish. The phenomenon isn't uniform. It moves, like a pulse under the ground, and every 9 years it rises closer to the surface. One researcher, who asked not to be named, described it as something under the soil line, watching from below, waking only when the air goes still. That same researcher died in a single-car accident 2 days after submitting his initial findings to a private journal. His report was never published. And now, 2025 has arrived. Another cold summer, another disappearance. But this time, people are paying attention. Because the pattern is no longer just a theory, it's a countdown. The kind that doesn't stop unless you reach the end. This is MindFuel, Chapter 11. What you've heard isn't coincidence, it's cycle, it's sequence, and it's always been coming. In Chapter 12, the campfire report, what the kids saw, we open the recovered footage from 3 teens who camped inside the anomaly zone, alone, 3 nights before the Andersons disappeared. Only one returned. Subscribe to MindFuel. The story isn't complete. And whatever's happening out there isn't done. What happened to the Anderson family is only part of the story. By now, you've heard the testimonies. You've seen the gaps in the timeline, the evidence that was buried, the names that were erased, the signs ignored. But this wasn't just about one family. It's about a forest with a memory. And maybe a forest with a will. For over 5 decades, the Klamath region has followed the same rhythm. Every 9 years, the woods pull someone inside and never give them back. They don't just vanish. They're removed, quietly, deliberately. And when the search teams come, when we send in our best equipment, our most trained people, something is already waiting. It doesn't run. It doesn't hide. It waits. We weren't meant to map this place. We weren't meant to hear our own voices echo back wrong. We weren't meant to camp where even the birds go quiet. Because the Klamath forest has rules, old ones, and we broke them. The signs were always there: stripped tents, animal DNA that doesn't belong to anything in the registry, structures moved without sound, people returning without memory, or not returning at all. And now, as more footage surfaces, as more patterns are traced, as more voices come forward, one thing becomes clear. The forest is still active. It didn't stop with the Andersons. It doesn't stop. Low-frequency audio begins, a sound like wind grinding against stone, then something breathing, close, distorted, then static, then silence. A field technician, part of the second search wave, left this note inside the battery case of his drone before it was confiscated. We looked for the Andersons. Something else found us instead. This is MindFuel. This was Chapter 12, but it's not the end. We're still collecting footage, still gathering first-hand accounts, still speaking with those who won't go on record but can't sleep at night, still mapping the coordinates they told us not to share. So here's what we ask: stay with us. Subscribe to MindFuel, because there's more to tell, and we will tell it. And If you ever find yourself hiking through Northern California and you hear something behind you, don't look back.